My Teisho today is on Case 5 of the Hekiganroku, or the Blue Cliff Record. It's sometimes titled Seppo's Grain of Rice, and I'll begin by reciting Engo's introduction to the case. To guard and maintain the essential teaching of Buddhism must be the vocation of the noble soul. He does not blink when killing a man, and then the man may be instantly enlightened. Hence he observes and acts simultaneously, and holds fast and lets go without restraint. He sees that essence and phenomena are not two, that experience and reality run parallel. He often rejects the first principle and adopts the second. This is because to cut through the complications too abruptly causes the beginner to lose his footing. A day like yesterday, that could not be avoided. Again, a day like today, his transgressions fill the heavens. If you are clear-sighted, however, you cannot blame him. If otherwise, you put yourself in the tiger's mouth. You will lose your life instantly. And then the main case. Seppo addressed the assembly and said, "All the great world, if I pick it up with my fingertips, is found to be like a grain of rice. I throw it down in front of your face, but like lacquer buckets you do not see it. And beat the drum, telling the monks to come out to work and search for it." And finally, Seppo's verse on the case. The ox head disappearing, the horse head appears. No dust on the mirror of the patriarch Soke. You beat the drum and search for it in vain. For whom do the spring flowers bloom? So our case today involves Seppo. His Chinese name was Shuifeng Yitsun. And he lived from 822 to 908 CE, right at the end of the Tang dynasty. And one thing that is often repeated about him is that he took a rather long time to fully ripen. By comparison, his very good friend and traveling companion, Gendo, attained enlightenment well before Seppo did, even though Gendo was 6 years younger. In fact, it was Gendo's skillful means that brought Seppo into full-blown awakening. And that event is recounted in a very beautiful set of stories that illuminate something of central significance in our current case. So I'd like to share that story with you now. According to Engo, wherever he went, Seppo would volunteer to serve as the rice steward. And I believe this was a pretty important service position in most temples, one that involved hard, humbling work, which he voluntarily undertook in order to put himself in a position to thoroughly commit himself, thoroughly penetrate the great matter. At one point, Seppo was the rice steward at Tozan's temple. One day, Master Tozan asked him, "What are you doing?" Seppo said, "Cleaning rice." Tozan asked, "Are you washing the grit to get rid of the rice, or are you washing the rice to get rid of the grit?" Seppo said, "Grit and rice are both removed at once." Now that kind of response is not one you'd ordinarily get from a completely new green Zen student. So it would seem from that exchange that Seppo already had something of the Dharma. But, as you may know, our insight into the Dharma can vary quite a bit in depth and clarity, and that's why we need a lifetime of practice, always trying to deepen our clarity. And so Seppo had a ways to go, and seeing this, Tozan pressed on. He asked, "If grit and rice are both removed at once, what will everybody eat?" At this, Seppo overturned the wash basin. Not a bad answer, maybe not the best answer. So Tozan said, "Your affinity lies with Toksan, and he directed Seppo to go see Master Tokusan, which he did. And as soon as Seppo arrived at Tokusan's temple, he asked this question. He said, "Does this student have any share in this matter handed down from antiquity as the fundamental vehicle?" Tokusan struck him a blow and said, "What are you saying?" And because of this, Seppo had an insight. Well, what do you suppose was the nature of that insight? Perhaps he realized that he was really kind of doubting himself, and that's why he's asking such an arch question. You know, it's very hard, it's impossible really for us to avoid a kind of self-doubt in our practice. We might hear the turning words of a Zen master or a Zen koan or a Zen poem, and we're baffled. But it's not because the things that masters say are inherently baffling. It's because we can't let go of our doubt. The doubt mass, we call it. That doubt that prevents us from accepting reality just as it is. But the friction between that doubt and our faith in the Buddha Dharma is what inspires our practice. And that's where Seppo was truly exemplary. Because despite being plagued by this doubt, he also had a tremendous resolve and was not ever going to give up. That's what makes all the difference. If you just keep going, as my teacher Myoyu Roshi always said, if you just keep going, if you just stick with your practice year after year, eventually doubt just crumbles away. There's really no other possible outcome. I mean, you could quit Zen altogether, or you can shine a light on the source of your doubt and illuminate it so brightly that you finally clearly see there's no basis for it, no ground upon which this doubt rests. And at just that exact moment, it evaporates. It just melts away. But for a long while, Seppo carried this bundle of doubt around with him everywhere he went. He thought he'd possibly had an opening experience, but on the other hand, he was in a kind of tortured state of uncertainty about it. Well, then it came to pass that while traveling, he and his good friend Gendo got snowed in on Tortoise Mountain. Tortoise Mountain is in Hunan province. For some days, Seppo used the time to diligently practice zazen, sitting night and day and night, trying to rid himself of his doubt. Gendo, on the other hand, just sort of lay around like a bag of rice. Eventually, Gendo asked Seppo, "Hey, why don't you do the same? Why don't you take a load off for a while? Kick back." And Seppo said to Gendo, "When Tokusan hit me, it was like the bottom of a bucket falling out." Meaning, he had had an insight about the whole nature of his doubt, and he was really trying to resolve it. Gendo saw his opportunity then, and suddenly shouted and said, "Haven't you heard it said that what comes in through the gate isn't the family treasure? You must let it flow out from your own breast to cover heaven and earth." Well, at these words, Seppo was suddenly greatly enlightened. He bowed and said to Gendo, "Brother, today on Tortoise Mountain I have finally attained the path." These words of Gendo, "You must let it flow out from your own breast to cover heaven and earth," are not just the words that brought about Seppo's great awakening, but are really a key to our current case. So that's why I wanted to tell you that story. Because you see, when Seppo says he picks up all the great world with his fingertips, well, the whole great world is flowing out of him, pouring out of him, through him. And he wants us to see that all the great world is continuously flowing out of each and every one of us just the same. It's all right here. It's all right here in front of our faces. It's all perfectly obvious. It was never otherwise. And yet, most of us can't see it. We want to see it. We want to believe the whole world really is right here in our fingers, because we all want that vast magnificence right here in our lives. yet somehow we miss it. How can we miss something as big as the whole great world? The whole great world is enormous. It has mountains and rivers and forests and buildings and people and animals. And but it has to be said, too, that 1,000 years ago, when the Chinese said all the great world, what they meant was not just our planet. They meant the entire universe. And as others have pointed out, the universe is really big, really big. I mean, our solar system by itself seems pretty darn big, but it's just one tiny speck at the edge of the Milky Way, a galaxy that contains some 100 billion stars. But the Milky Way is not the only galaxy. Some years ago, the Hubble telescope revealed that there are perhaps 200 billion galaxies in the visible universe. And if that's not big enough for you, some scientists suggest there's no law of physics that would prevent there being multiple universes, each with its own billions of galaxies. In other words, the whole great world includes everything, with nothing left out. And yet, we miss it. For my money, I'd say we miss it exactly, precisely because it is truly boundless. So apparently size really does matter. You know, we can't step away from the whole universe long enough or far enough to see it. We keep trying to. We keep trying to see it as though it were apart from us because we want to control it, to have it. It's natural. We try to gain the infinite through finite things, phenomena. It's the story of our lives. Looking for the whole great, beautiful world with the eye of money, the eye of possession, the eye of status, the eye of book learning. But all of this is like looking for yourself outside of yourself. And as long as that is what you're doing, you might as well be snowed in on Tortoise Mountain for 1,000 years. You won't see that it's pouring out of your own breast, covering heaven and earth, right here, right now, everywhere, all the time. And then, of course, in our case, Seppo pulls the rug out from under us and says all this big universe is just the size of a grain of rice. Technically, he said it's a grain of unhulled rice. It's interesting. That is, this whole vast universe is a grain of rice in its most natural, most humble, unpolished form. In a sense, it's really nothing special. All the great world, all the vast universe is just an ordinary little grain of rice. And he continues. I throw it down in front of your faces, but like lacquer buckets, you do not see it. Beat the drum, telling the monks to come out to work and search for it. You know, we beat the drum during Sesshin. Everyone gathers and the work period begins. We clean and cook and repair. We sweep and chop and pound nails. We do this literally, of course, but it's also just the nature of our practice when we're sitting zazen. It's work to see the whole great world flowing out of your own breast. But if you have Seppo's resolve, if you work hard for a long time, there will come a day when you finally stop looking for yourself outside yourself. And then you're just here. You're just here moment by moment. And it's a really very tiny little space, while at the same time vast. So I guess size doesn't matter after all. It's tiny, you see, not in size, but in time. Being present, being alive, moment by moment. Where is there room for even a grain of rice? When you arrive here, you're no longer hanging on to anything at all. And that is what allows you to be continuously aware, present, vital, truly alive, appreciating your life. This is the meaning of Seppo's throwing it down in front of our faces. He's welcoming us into a realm in which everything is completely naked, clear, intimate, pure. I think we should look closely at this throwing down. In his annotations on the case, Engo remarks, "I'm afraid it can't be thrown down." I find that remark quite extraordinary. Why does he say it can't be thrown down? Is it possible to pick something up and then be unable to throw it down? Sounds like a curse. Yeah, I think we should study closely this picking up and throwing down. Seppo's picking up is Seppo just fully being himself with no shilly-shally. Don't give me any piffle and puff. And his throwing down is nicely reflected in the line of Setcho's verse that reads, "The ox head disappearing, the horse head appears." Ox head and horse head are figures from ancient Chinese mythology, and they're mentioned in the Shurangama Sutra. They are guardians of the underworld, demons who escort and prod the dead into the courts of hell to be judged and purged. Katsuki Sekida Roshi says that oxhead and horsehead in Setcho's poem are not important in and of themselves, but their disappearing and appearing are. They're meant to describe the kind of fleeting nature of reality. Things come into being, and then they go out of existence. Another thing rises, and that fades away too. And then another thing comes, and it goes away too. And then another. And all of this in rapid succession, moment after moment. But the problem is, we're so busy trying to hold on to things we like, or trying to get rid of the things we don't like, that we can't just be at ease with reality as it is. We doubt that we will be safe in an ever-changing world. And truth be told, yeah, we're not safe. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't accord ourselves with the truth. So as things are reflected in the mind, we try to sort them into categories of good and bad, right and wrong, pleasant and unpleasant, all kind of a vain attempt to hold things together in kind of sensible ways. But it doesn't work. Reality doesn't care what we think about it. Things are just as things are. And because we're so busy sorting out our experiences, we miss most of them. We miss most of our lives doing that. We pay an enormous price when we put all this attention on one thing at the cost of all the others because we doubt that letting go of it will be good for us. And our lives, meanwhile, are flowing past us. And we can't see who we really are, what we really are. And what we are is right here, right now. There isn't anything more. This is what Setcho is referring to when he writes in his poem, "No dust on the mirror of the patriarch Soke." This is a reference to Aino, the 6th Zen patriarch, who wrote a poem about a mirror as a metaphor for the mind. We don't need to get into the whole story behind that poem, but the point is that the unified, liberated mind is like a mirror, conscious of whatever comes before it, reflecting everything that comes before it with neither resistance nor clinging. But for many of us, that's a bridge too far. We find it plainly impossible to see how to live our lives that way. We think picking up and throwing down are about having things and getting rid of things. We don't see that picking up is all about not picking up, that throwing down is all about not ever being able to throw it down. I know it sounds like double talk, but as Master Engo says, if you are clear-eyed, then you'll find Seppo's crazy words or my crazy words perfectly acceptable, perfectly clear. Seppo knew what it was to feel blind, to feel opaque as a lacquer bucket. He knew what it was to be plagued by doubt. So instead of telling us the truth directly, he gives us picking up and throwing down the whole great world in a grain of rice. He gives us a fish ladder, I like to say, a fish ladder instead of a dam for us to leap. So we have to struggle, work, jump, leap beyond the dam of doubt. And maybe when you have come up against the plunging water for the last time, when you've exhausted every ounce of strength to leap clear, and you still cannot attain the great way, when you finally and forever realize that you're never going to find what you're looking for outside of this, that's when you suddenly leap clear and become a dragon. That is when you see what a gracious, courageous, uncompromisingly compassionate teacher Master Seppo was, giving us this gift of our whole lives with nothing held back. It's none other than the whole great world, right here, right now. Every moment of every day, in every corner and crevice of your life, filling up all space and time. This whole great world is calling to us, continuously calling. It has been doing so since before we were born. And you cannot throw it down. How can you throw down an entire universe? Where would it go? And how can you throw down your life? You cannot throw it down any more than you can stop being who you are, what you are. You cannot get out of the way of reality. So why not accept it? Why not go on as you are, just as you are, perfect, whole, and complete? Thank you.